The morning was tranquil as Ava adjusted her crisp white uniform, standing before the gates of the imposing Blakewood estate. The sprawling mansion, cloaked in a veil of silence, seemed both majestic and foreboding. Today marked the beginning of her new role, a private nurse tasked with caring for Ethan, a boy confined to a vegetative state. Ava had worked in nursing for over a decade, but this case already felt different, heavy with unspoken secrets. The estate's grand doors creaked open, revealing Daniel, Ethan's father. He was a tall, composed man whose silvering hair and weary eyes told a story of sleepless nights and unrelenting concern. His warm smile, though faint, hinted at a man clinging to hope. "Welcome, Ava. We're grateful to have you here," Daniel said, his voice measured but genuine. "Thank you, Mr. Blakewood. I'll do everything I can to help Ethan," Ava replied, her tone professional yet reassuring. As she stepped into the vast, echoing foyer, the weight of the house's atmosphere settled on her shoulders, a home where whispers of the past lingered in every corner. Daniel led her through a series of hallways adorned with paintings that seemed to watch her every move. They paused at a large door, but before Daniel could speak, a sharp voice interrupted. "Daniel, we need to discuss Ethan's treatment," a woman declared, stepping into view. Linda, Ethan's stepmother, was strikingly elegant, with an air of authority that bordered on arrogance. Her cold gaze swept over Ava briefly before returning to Daniel. "The boy's condition is worsening. I believe we should consult my family's doctor." Daniel's expression hardened. "Ethan is receiving the best care available, Linda. This is not the time to second-guess his treatment plan." The tension between them was palpable, and Ava remained silent, carefully observing. It became clear that deep fractures that could jeopardize Ethan's care lay beneath the Blakewood estate's polished facade. As the argument subsided, Daniel turned back to Ava. "I trust you'll do what's best for my son. Let me show you to his room." Following Daniel, Ava felt the full gravity of her new responsibility. The boy she was about to meet wasn't just a patient. He was the center of a quiet storm brewing within this family. Little did she know, her arrival would set off a chain of events that would uncover truths the Blakewoods had fought hard to bury. As Daniel opened the door to Ethan's room, Ava was struck by the stillness inside. The soft hum of machines filled the air, monitoring every breath and heartbeat of the boy lying motionless in a large, ornate bed. Ethan looked small and fragile against the heavy silk bedding, his pale face illuminated by the warm glow of the afternoon sun filtering through the curtains. Tubes and wires surrounded him, each one a lifeline tethering him to a reality that seemed far away. Daniel lingered by the door, his voice softer now. "Ethan has been in this state for nearly 2 years. The accident, it changed everything. He was always such a bright, curious child. It's hard to see him like this." Ava nodded, her heart heavy with unspoken questions. She moved closer to Ethan, her professional instincts kicking in. She checked his vital signs and adjusted his position to ensure he was comfortable. As she worked, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. When she glanced up, she noticed Linda standing in the doorway, her sharp eyes fixed on her. "Make sure you follow the exact instructions for his care," Linda said curtly. "We've had too many nurses come and go. I expect better from you." Ava met Linda's gaze with quiet resolve. "I'll do everything I can to provide Ethan the best care." Linda's lips tightened into a thin smile, but her tone betrayed no warmth. "Good. Because anything less would be unacceptable." Ava felt an unease settle over her as Linda disappeared down the hall. Linda's demeanor seemed off, not just cold but guarded, as if she were hiding something. Ava's years of experience had taught her to trust her instincts, and they were already whispering that there was more to Ethan's condition than what met the eye. Later that evening, as Ava reviewed Ethan's medical records, she noticed something strange. Several treatments and medications were listed as part of his regimen, but one particular entry caught her attention, a vague mention of an experimental therapy. The details were sparse, and the prescribing doctor's name was conspicuously absent. Why was this therapy included without proper documentation? Ava thought, frowning. She resolved to ask Daniel about it the next day, but a nagging voice told her to tread carefully. This family was not as harmonious as it appeared, and the truth was likely buried under layers of conflict and secrets. The house felt unusually quiet as I followed the day routine the next morning. She carefully repositioned Ethan and began monitoring his vitals. His expression was serene, almost angelic, but a sadness etched into the corners of his closed eyes that tugged at Ava's heart. As she adjusted the tubing near his hand, she noticed something that made her freeze. Ethan's finger moved, a slight, deliberate twitch. Ava stared, her breath catching in her throat. She had seen involuntary spasms in other patients, but this felt different. "Ethan," she whispered, leaning closer. "Can you hear me?" There was only silence for a moment, the soft beeping of the monitors filling the room. Then, just as Ava began to doubt herself, Ethan's finger moved again. This time, it was unmistakable. Her heart raced as she leaned in closer. "Ethan, if you can understand me, move your finger again." A pause. Then, as light as a feather falling, his finger twitched. Ava's throat tightened. This was no random reflex. He was trying to communicate. The door creaked open before she could react further, and Daniel stepped in. His face lit up with a rare smile. "How's Ethan doing today?" Ava hesitated, unsure of whether to share what she had just witnessed. "He seems stable," she replied carefully, "but I'd like to monitor him closely for any signs of change." Daniel nodded, oblivious to her inner turmoil. "I appreciate your dedication. Let me know if you notice anything unusual." After Daniel left, Ava turned back to Ethan. She wanted to believe she wasn't imagining things, but she knew the implications of what she had just seen. If Ethan was trying to communicate, it meant there was still hope, but it also raised questions about his care and why no one else had noticed this before. As the day wore on, Ava remained vigilant, watching for any further signs of movement. She spoke to Ethan softly, encouraging him to give her another signal, but he remained still. Just as doubt began to creep in, Ethan's eyelids fluttered ever so slightly, and Ava caught the faintest glimpse of his eyes. The moment was brief but undeniable. Her mind raced. Should she tell the family? The doctors? What if they dismissed her observations as wishful thinking? Or worse, what if someone in this house didn't want Ethan to recover? That night, Ava sat by Ethan's bedside, her resolve strengthening with every passing hour. She couldn't ignore what she had seen. Whatever secrets this family was hiding, she would uncover them, for Ethan's sake. "Don't worry," she murmured, a quiet promise in the stillness. "I'll find out the truth, no matter what it takes." The following day, Ava began her shift with renewed determination. Ethan's subtle movements and fleeting signs of awareness lingered in her mind like a puzzle waiting to be solved. She decided to double-check every detail of his care. As she went through the medicine cabinet in his room, meticulously organizing the vials and prescriptions, her hands paused on something unusual, a small, unlabeled vial tucked behind the marked medications. The liquid inside was clear, but there was no documentation or indication of its purpose. Ava frowned, turning the vial in her hands. "What is this doing here?" she wondered. Before she could investigate further, the door opened suddenly, and Linda stepped in, her sharp gaze immediately landing on Ava. "What are you doing?" Linda's voice was tense, almost accusatory. Ava quickly slid the vial behind other bottles, her heart racing. "Just organizing Ethan's medications to ensure everything is in order," she replied calmly, masking her suspicion. Linda's eyes narrowed. "Make sure you don't touch anything unnecessarily. Everything is exactly where it needs to be." Her voice carried an edge that made Ava's unease grow. As Linda left the room, Ava couldn't shake the feeling that the stepmother's reaction was more than just overprotectiveness. Something about her behavior seemed calculated, as if she were hiding something. Ava carefully pocketed the vial and resolved to examine it later when she had a moment alone. That evening, after the household had settled, Ava retreated to her small quarters in the estate. She held the vial to the light, her mind racing with possibilities. What is this? Why isn't it listed in Ethan's treatment plan? Her instincts told her this discovery was significant, and she couldn't let it go unanswered. The more she thought about it, the clearer it became that she couldn't trust anyone in the house. She decided I needed proof before I confronted anyone, slipping the vial into a secure compartment in her bag. The following day, Ava's resolve was tested almost immediately. As she entered Ethan's room to begin her morning routine, she found Cleo, Ethan's biological mother, seated by his bedside. Cleo's presence was unexpected, her elegant demeanor contrasting with the deep sadness etched into her features. She softly stroked Ethan's hand, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. Ava hesitated at the door, unsure if she should interrupt, but Cleo looked up and offered a faint smile. "You must be Ava. Thank you for taking care of my son." "It's my privilege," Ava replied, stepping inside. "I want to do everything I can to help him." Cleo nodded, her gaze returning to Ethan. "He's been through so much. And now, I just feel like I've failed him." Her voice broke slightly, and Ava saw the weight of guilt hanging over her. Before Ava could respond, the door burst open and Linda stormed in. Her eyes immediately narrowed at the sight of Cleo. "You always show up unannounced," Linda snapped. "This is not the time for another one of your guilt trips." Cleo stood, her composure cracking under Linda's scorn. "I'm his mother, Linda. I don't need permission to see my son. And yet, every time you visit, he seems to get worse," Linda retorted, her voice cold and accusatory. "Maybe if you cared more about his treatment and less about playing the victim, Ethan wouldn't be in this state." The tension in the room was palpable, and Ava found herself caught in the crossfire of their hostility. Sensing the situation escalating, she stepped forward. "Please, both of you. Ethan needs peace, not arguments. Let's focus on what's best for him." Cleo and Linda glared at each other momentarily before Cleo sighed and turned to Ava. "You're new here. You don't know what it's like or what this family has been through. But I hope you're strong enough to handle it." Linda scoffed. "She doesn't need your warnings, Cleo. She must follow the care plan and avoid things she doesn't understand." As Cleo left the room, her heels clicking against the marble floor, Linda turned to Ava. "Don't let her fill your head with her nonsense. This family has enough problems without her stirring things up." Ava nodded politely, but her mind was racing. The exchange had revealed more than either woman likely intended. Cleo's sadness and guilt hinted at a more profound history, while Linda's defensiveness bordered on paranoia. They're both hiding something, Ava thought, her resolve to uncover the truth hardening. As Ava reflected on the day's events that evening, she realized Ethan's isolation. The people around him seemed more concerned with their grievances and secrets than his well-being. Ava felt a pang of determination. "If no one else will put Ethan first, I will." Before going to bed, Ava retrieved the unlabeled vial from her bag and examined it again. She knew the only way to protect Ethan was to find out exactly what was happening in this house, no matter how dangerous the truth might be. The following days at Blakewood Estate were a whirlwind of tension and discovery. Ava spent her mornings meticulously caring for Ethan, ensuring his comfort and stability, while her evenings were consumed with quiet investigations. The weight of the unlabeled vial in her bag pressed on her thoughts like a constant reminder that something sinister might be at play. One quiet afternoon, as Ava organized the medications in Ethan's room, she noticed something that sent a chill down her spine. In a small drawer at the back of a cabinet, hidden beneath a stack of neatly folded towels, she found several empty vials identical to the one she had discovered earlier. Her hands trembled as she held one of the empty containers. Why are these hidden? She wondered. There was no record of this medication in Ethan's treatment plan, and the absence of labels made it impossible to identify the substance. Ava's heart raced. Could this explain Ethan's mysterious condition? Could someone be administering these without proper medical oversight? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sudden sound of footsteps approaching the room. She quickly hid the vials in the drawer and resumed her work, feigning calmness. The door opened, and Linda entered, her expression sharp. "I hope you're finding everything in order," Linda said, her tone clipped. Her eyes scanned the room, lingering on the cabinet Ava had just closed. "Yes, everything is fine," Ava replied, keeping her voice steady. But Linda's piercing gaze made her feel like the woman could see through her calm facade. Linda approached Ethan's bed, her expression softening as she looked at him. "He's such a strong boy," she said, almost to herself. But her voice lacked warmth, and Ava couldn't shake the feeling that Linda's concern was more performative than genuine. As Linda left the room, Ava released the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. There's something she's not telling me, Ava thought, her resolve to uncover the truth growing stronger. That night, under the cover of darkness, she looked closer at Ethan's surroundings. She started with his bedside table, carefully sifting through drawers and cabinets. In the bottom drawer, beneath a stack of old notebooks and photographs, Ava found a small locked diary with Ethan's name scrawled on the cover in childlike handwriting. Her fingers brushed over the lock. This could hold the answers I'm looking for, she thought. But the lock was secure, and she could not open it. As she stood there, pondering her next move, she noticed a faint movement from Ethan's bed. Turning quickly, she saw his eyelids flutter, and then, to her shock, his eyes opened slightly. Though his movements were slow and strained, there was a clarity in his gaze that Ava had not seen before. "Ethan," she whispered, leaning closer. "If you can hear me, can you show me where the key to your diary is?" Ethan's gaze shifted ever so slightly toward the drawer on the bedside table. Ava followed his gaze and carefully searched the drawer, finding a minor, golden key hidden beneath a pile of papers. She held it up to show Ethan, and his faint nod confirmed her discovery. With trembling hands, Ava unlocked the diary and began to read. The pages were filled with entries written in a shaky, childlike scrawl, detailing Ethan's fears and confusion about the conflict between his mother and stepmother. "Mom and Linda fought again today." One entry read, "I don't understand why they can't just get along. Every time they fight, it feels like they're tearing me apart." Another entry, dated just weeks before the accident that left him in his current state, was even more chilling. "I feel like someone is watching me all the time. Linda gave me new medicine today, but it made me feel strange. I told Mom, but she said not to worry. I don't think she understands." Ava's heart broke as she read the words of a frightened child caught in the crossfire of family turmoil. She closed the diary, her mind racing. This isn't just about neglect or carelessness. Someone has been deliberately putting Ethan at risk. But who? The tension in the house reached a breaking point later that week. Ava overheard a heated argument between Cleo and Daniel as she passed the study to retrieve medical supplies. "We can't keep him like this forever." Cleo's voice trembled with emotion. "It's not a life, Daniel. He's suffering." Daniel's voice was firm but strained. "I won't give up on him, Cleo. There's still hope." Ava stopped in her tracks, her heart pounding. Are they planning to turn off Ethan's life support? The thought sent a wave of panic through her. She rushed back to Ethan's room, determined to protect him. Ethan's eyes opened again as she stood by his bed, this time with more urgency. His fingers twitched, and his lips moved faintly. Ava leaned in, her heart racing. "Ethan, what is it? What do you want to tell me?" she asked, trembling. His voice was barely a whisper, but the words were clear. "Don't trust them," he said, his eyes widening with fear. Before Ava could respond, the machines monitoring Ethan's vitals filled the room with sharp, insistent beeps. His breathing grew labored, and his heart rate spiked. Ava sprang into action, pressing the emergency button to summon medical help. Ava stood back as a thin room filled with nurses and doctors watched, watchinglessly as they worked to stabilize Ethan. She knew this was no accident. Someone in this house had done something to push Ethan to the brink, and they would stop at nothing to keep their secrets hidden. WVA stepped out of the room. Her mind raced when the doctors finally stabilized Ethan. She had to act quickly before it was too late. If Ethan's words are valid, someone in this house is a threat, not just to him, but to anyone who gets in their way. Determined to uncover the truth, Ava retrieved the unlabeled vial from her bag and resolved to have it tested. She wouldn't let Ethan's warnings go unheard. Whatever was happening in the Blakewood estate, Ava knew she was running out of time to save him. The following day, Ethan's condition remained fragile. His sudden downturn had left Ava on edge, and she couldn't shake the sense that someone in the house was actively trying to harm him. Determined to protect her patient, Ava called Daniel to inform him of her decision to transfer Ethan to the hospital for a comprehensive evaluation. Daniel hesitated, but eventually agreed. "If it's for Ethan's safety, then do what you must," he said, his voice heavy with worry. The transfer was swift, and Ethan was under the care of a specialized medical team at the city hospital within hours. Ava stayed by his side as the doctors ran a battery of tests, analyzing every aspect of his condition. As the hours stretched, she clutched the unlabeled vial in her hand, waiting for the right moment to show it to the medical team. When Dr. Huxley, the lead physician, arrived to review the test results, Ava took a deep breath and handed him the vial. "I found this among Ethan's medications. It's unlabeled, and I'm concerned it may have contributed to his recent complications." Dr. Huxley examined the vial with a frown. "This substance is not part of any prescribed treatment," he said, his tone grave. "We'll need to run tests to determine its composition." As the lab worked to analyze the mysterious liquid, the test results for Ethan's condition began to paint a clearer picture. Elevated levels of sedatives and other compounds suggested that his treatment had been tampered with. Ava's suspicions deepened. Who had access to Ethan's medications? Who would go this far? As Ava sat by Ethan's bedside that evening, a detective arrived at the hospital. Detective Lang was a no-nonsense woman with piercing eyes that seemed to see straight through lies. Ava recounted everything she had observed at Blakewood Estate, from the hidden vials to the tension between Linda and Cleo. "This isn't just negligence," Ava said firmly. "Someone is intentionally trying to harm Ethan." Detective Lang nodded, her expression grim. "We'll investigate. But for now, keep an eye on your patient. If someone is willing to harm him, they may not stop just because he's in the hospital." The thought sent a chill down Ava's spine. As she looked at Ethan, so small and vulnerable in the hospital bed, she vowed to stay by his side no matter what. The following day, the hospital's security team made a shocking discovery. Footage from the cameras in Ethan's room showed Daniel sneaking in during the early hours of the morning and injecting something into Ethan's foreline. Ava's heart sank as the revelation shattered her trust in Ethan's father. When confronted by Detective Lang, Daniel broke down in tears. "I couldn't bear to see him like this," he confessed. "He's been suffering for so long. I thought I was ending his pain." Ava watched the scene unfold with a mix of anger and heartbreak. Daniel's actions, though rooted in his grief, had nearly cost Ethan his life. His misguided attempt to end Ethan's suffering was reckless and criminal. As Daniel was taken into custody, Ava's mind raced. If Daniel was responsible for the injection, what about the other medications? What role had Linda or Cleo played in this tangled web of deception and desperation? The results from the lab finally came back, revealing that the liquid in the unlabeled vial was a potent sedative, one that could exacerbate Ethan's condition if administered improperly. Dr. Huxley shared the findings with Ava and Detective Lang, confirming their fears. "This substance should never have been near a patient like Ethan," he said. "Its presence raises serious questions about his care." Meanwhile, the Blakewood estate was in turmoil. Cleo and Linda, upon learning of Daniel's arrest, turned their suspicions toward each other. The tension erupted during a hospital meeting with the medical staff, with each woman accusing the other of endangering Ethan. "You've been trying to undermine his treatment from the start," Cleo shouted, her voice shaking with rage. "I've always known you were jealous of my son," Linda fired back, her tone icy. "And you've been too wrapped up in your guilt to see what's best for him. All I've ever done is try to help." Ava stepped in, her voice calm but firm. "This isn't about either of you. It's about Ethan. He needs all of us to put aside our differences and focus on his recovery." Her words seemed to cut through the noise, leaving Cleo and Linda staring at each other in tense silence. Ava took the opportunity to press forward. "If either of you knows anything about the medications that were found in Ethan's room, now is the time to speak up." Neither woman admitted to involvement, but Ava could see the guilt and fear on their faces. One of them knows more than they're letting on, she thought. But which one? As the day wore on, Ethan's condition began to stabilize. His vital signs improved, and his breathing grew steadier. Dr. Huxley credited the change to removing the harmful medications and returning to a proper treatment plan. But Ava couldn't shake the feeling that the danger wasn't over. As she sat by Ethan's bed that evening, he opened his eyes again. This time, his gaze was more muscular, more focused. He looked at Ava, his voice barely above a whisper. "Be careful," he said, shivering down her spine. "Careful of what, Ethan?" Ava asked, leaning closer. Not who they seem, he murmured, his eyes fluttering shut again. Ava's heart raced. Ethan's warning confirmed her worst fears. The danger wasn't just coming from one person. It was more profound, more insidious, and she ran out of time to uncover the truth. The days following Daniel's arrest were a whirlwind of activity. Ethan remained in the hospital, his condition stable but fragile. Ava, now more determined than ever, worked tirelessly with Detective Lang to uncover the truth behind the toxic medications and Ethan's sudden downturn. Detective Lang's team conducted a deeper investigation into the Blakewood estate. Medical logs, family records, and staff interviews revealed a disturbing pattern. Someone had been manipulating Ethan's treatment for months, likely to keep him in a vegetative state. The motive was unclear, but Ava suspected it had less to do with Ethan's well-being and more with control over him, the family, and the estate. One evening, while reviewing Ethan's medical chart, Ava received a call from Detective Lang. "We've discovered something," the detective said, her voice sharp with urgency. Linda had access to several prescriptions that weren't officially recorded. "We're questioning her now." Ava's stomach churned. Linda, could she be the one behind all this? Linda's cold demeanor and dismissive attitude toward Cleo had always seemed suspicious, but Ava couldn't ignore how fiercely Linda had claimed to care for Ethan. The following morning, Linda arrived at the hospital, her face pale and her usual composure replaced by visible distress. "I heard about Daniel," she began, her voice shaking. "I swear I never wanted this. I've always tried to protect Ethan." Ava studied her carefully, weighing her words. "Then help us," she said. "If you know anything about the medications or who else might be involved, now is the time to come forward." Linda hesitated, her eyes darting toward Ethan's room. "There's something you need to know," she said finally. "I didn't want to use those medications, but I was pressured. Daniel, he wasn't acting alone. Someone else wanted Ethan to stay like this." Ava's breath caught. "Who?" Linda's lips trembled. "Cleo." The revelation hit Ava like a thunderclap. Could Cleo, Ethan's biological mother, really have conspired to harm her son? It didn't add up. Cleo's visits to Ethan's bedside had been filled with remorse and sorrow. But then Ava remembered Ethan's words, "Not who they seem." That afternoon, Cleo arrived at the hospital. She entered Ethan's room quietly, her face serene, but her eyes shadowed with something darker. Ava, seated near the window, oversaw her. "You've been so good to him," Cleo said, her voice soft but oddly detached. "I don't know how to thank you. I'm just doing my job," Ava replied, her tone neutral. "But I have questions about Ethan's care before I came on board." Cleo's expression flickered, the mask of composure slipping momentarily. "What do you mean?" "His doctors didn't prescribe some of the medications in his regimen. They were harmful, and they almost cost him his life," Ava said, her gaze steady. "I need to know if you were aware of this." Cleo's face hardened. "Are you accusing me of something?" "I'm not accusing anyone yet," Ava said carefully. "But I need answers, for Ethan's sake." Cleo stood abruptly, her movements sharp. "I would never hurt my son. Everything I've done has been for him. Do you think I wanted him to end up like this?" Ava stood as well, her voice firm but calm. "Then tell me what you know. If someone else is responsible, we must stop them before it's too late." For a moment, Cleo seemed on the verge of speaking. Then her shoulders slumped, and she shook her head. "You don't understand. You don't know what it's like to feel powerless, to lose control of everything." "Help me understand," Ava urged. But Cleo turned away, her silence heavy with implication. As she left the room, Ava's suspicion deepened. Cleo was hiding something, and it was only a matter of time before the truth came to light. That evening, Detective Lang returned with another update. "We've found a financial trail," she said grimly. Cleo had been withdrawing large sums of money from Ethan's trust fund over the past year. She claimed it was for his care, but the expenditures don't match. "We're bringing her in for questioning." The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together. Cleo's guilt-ridden visits, her insistence on ending Ethan's life support, and now the financial discrepancies, all pointed to a mother desperate to escape her failures. But Ava couldn't shake the feeling that Cleo's motivations went deeper than money. The following day, Cleo was brought in for questioning. Under pressure, she finally broke down. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she confessed. "I thought, if Ethan stayed like this, I could keep the family together. Daniel would stay, and we'd have a purpose, a reason to keep going. But then Linda got involved, and everything spiraled out of control." "Linda pressured you to use the medications?" Detective Lang pressed. Cleo nodded. "She said it was for the best, that we could control the situation. I didn't know how far she'd go." With Cleo's confession and Linda's complicity exposed, the case took a dramatic turn. Both women were charged with endangering Ethan's life and misusing his trust fund. Daniel, still in custody, faced additional charges for his reckless actions. But amidst the chaos, a sense of hope emerged. Ethan's recovery, though slow, continued steadily. His body grew more potent, and his moments of awareness became more frequent. Ava stayed by his side every step of the way, her presence a steady beacon of comfort and care. One afternoon, as the sun streamed through the hospital window, Ethan opened his eyes for the first time. His voice, still weak but clear, carried a simple message that made Ava's heart swell with emotion. "Thank you." Ethan's first words marked a turning point for his recovery and everyone involved in the tangled web of betrayal and redemption. Once filled with tension and uncertainty, the hospital room became a space of hope and healing. Ava, who had dedicated every waking moment to Ethan's care, felt relief wash over her. She leaned closer, tears brimming in her eyes. "Ethan, you're so strong. We're all here for you." Ethan's fingers twitched weakly, but his gaze was steady as he took in the familiar and unfamiliar faces around him. He looked at Ava with gratitude, then turned his eyes toward the window, where sunlight poured in, a symbol of the new life awaiting him. Ethan's progress astonished the medical staff as the days turned into weeks. His physical therapy sessions began slowly but steadily. Each small triumph, a flexed hand, a lifted arm, a whispered word, became a cause for celebration. Ava remained by his side, often cheering him on with quiet encouragement. Meanwhile, the fallout from the investigation shook the Blakewood family to its core. Linda, once the cold and calculating stepmother, faced charges for her role in Ethan's mistreatment. Cleo, despite her remorseful confession, was held accountable for her actions. Both women expressed regret, but the damage they had caused left a stain on their relationships with Ethan and each other. Daniel, released on bail, was a shadow of his former self. He visited Ethan frequently, sitting quietly by his son's bedside and apologizing that Ethan was too young to comprehend fully. Ava observed these moments with a mix of pity and anger. He had almost taken Ethan's life, yet he seemed determined to mend what was broken. Despite the family's turmoil, Ethan continued to thrive. Ava and Dr. Huxley worked tirelessly to refine his treatment plan, ensuring his body and mind regained strength. Over time, Ethan began speaking more frequently, his voice growing stronger with each passing day. One afternoon, as Ava helped him with his speech exercises, Ethan paused and looked at her. "You never gave up on me," he said softly. Ava smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "Neither did you, Ethan. That's why you're here today." Months later, Ethan returned home, not to the Blakewood estate, but to a new, smaller house where he could continue his recovery without the shadows of the past looming over him. The courts had placed his guardianship with a trusted relative, Aunt Clara, who had long been estranged from the family but was known for her warmth and stability. Ava remained a constant presence in Ethan's life. Though her official role as his nurse ended, she chose to stay involved, visiting regularly and assisting with his care. Their bond was unbreakable, forged through shared hardship and unwavering trust. On one of her visits, Ava joined Ethan and Aunt Clara in their cozy living room, where the boy worked on a puzzle with a focus and determination that belied his years. His laughter filled the space, a sound Ava hadn't thought she'd ever hear. "You're doing amazing, Ethan," Ava said, placing a piece on the puzzle's edge. Ethan grinned. "It's because of you, Ava. You showed me how to fight." Tears prickled Ava's eyes, but she blinked them away. "No, Ethan. You showed me. You reminded me why I became a nurse. to protect, heal, and never lose hope. Meanwhile, the legal repercussions for the Blakewood family continued. Linda accepted a plea deal, agreeing to testify against others involved in exchange for a reduced sentence. Cleo, seeking redemption, committed to therapy and joined a foundation that supported families with critically ill children. Though she wasn't granted custody, she remained involved in Ethan's life, slowly rebuilding trust. Burdened by guilt, Daniel made the difficult decision to distance himself from Ethan, believing his presence might cause more harm than good. His tearful goodbye left Ava with mixed feelings. At least he finally put Ethan's needs above his own, she thought. Ethan's story became a beacon of inspiration. The investigation into his mistreatment led to sweeping changes in medical oversight laws, ensuring no other child would endure what he had. Ava, alongside Dr. Huxley, advocated for these reforms, speaking at conferences and sharing Ethan's journey as a testament to the power of resilience and love. Ava and Ethan visited a local park on one bright spring day, where children played and laughter echoed. Now stronger and more vibrant, Ethan ran across the grass with newfound freedom. Ava watched, her heart brimming with joy. As the sun began to set, Ethan returned to her side, his cheeks flushed with excitement. "Ava," he said, looking up at her wide-eyed, "do you think I'll ever be able to help people like you helped me?" She knelt to meet his gaze, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "You already have, Ethan. Your story has changed lives. And someday, when you're ready, I know you'll do even more." At that moment, surrounded by the golden light of dusk, Ava realized that her journey with Ethan wasn't just about his recovery. It was about finding purpose, rebuilding hope, and creating a brighter future. Together, they had turned a story of betrayal and despair into one of resilience and transformation. As they walked home, hand in hand, Ava felt a deep sense of peace. Life will always have challenges, but with faith, courage, and the strength to fight for what's right, even the darkest moments could lead to the brightest beginnings.